The registered letter arrived on Tuesday, smelling faintly of cheap lavender perfume and stale, self-important bureaucracy, claiming my entire collection of legally owned firearms violated the Shadow Creek HOA's strict aesthetic and safety guidelines. Are they completely out of their minds? I thought, the question echoing off the vaulted cedar ceiling of my living room. I stared at the highly manicured signature of Mrs. Bethany Hayes, president of the Shadow Creek Homeowners Association, a woman who had never stepped a pristine foot on my 300-acre working cattle ranch. This wasn't a mere dispute over fence paint. This was war, and they just brought a pen to a gunfight against a woman whose property taxes alone could fund their annual neighborhood potluck. I walked out onto the porch, the smell of sun-baked earth and alfalfa hay heavy in the midday air, and let out a long, ragged sigh that tasted of frustration and disbelief. My ranch, the Triple J, sat 3 miles from their nearest cul-de-sac, connected only by a legally enforced easement road. My land predated their subdivision by 50 years. Their community, with its perfect little lawns and decorative fountains, felt like a distant, irrelevant planet. Yet, here they were, trying to impose their suburban tyranny. What gives them the right to dictate how I protect my livelihood? I gripped the wooden railing, the rough texture grounding me against the swirling anger. The safety of my livestock from coyotes and the very real need for self-defense out here wasn't a guideline to be debated. It was a daily reality. The confrontation came 3 weeks later, not as a whimper, but a screech. A black Cadillac Escalade, gleaming like a polished obsidian monument to excess, pulled up the long gravel driveway, followed by a pale blue Toyota Prius, an unmistakable sign of a committee. Bethany Hayes, a woman sculpted by expensive Botox and fueled by pure, unadulterated entitlement, stepped out first. She wore a tailored suit and sunglasses big enough to shield her from the harsh reality she was about to face. Trailing her were 2 nervous-looking board members, Mr. Henderson and Ms. Chavez, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, perhaps trapped in an elevator with a swarm of bees. Ms. Jensen, you received our notification. Bethany's voice was sharp, cutting through the chirping of crickets like a rusty saw. The court has affirmed our ability to enforce the community's covenant, specifically Article 4, Section B. The storage of destructive or non-sporting weaponry is prohibited within the community boundaries. She didn't ask. She declared, pulling a document from a designer handbag. My blood ran cold. A court order? How could they possibly have gotten a temporary injunction this fast? I could feel the heat rising in my neck. This was more organized than I expected. Henderson and Chavez shifted their weight, their eyes darting nervously between my worn boots and the vastness of the ranch. Bethany, darling. I leaned against a porch column, trying to keep my voice low and steady. A dangerous calm before the storm. I am not in your community. My ranch is exempted by the original deed restrictions, a fact my lawyer has reiterated 10 times. Nonsense, she snapped, waving the paper. Our legal boundaries were expanded last year. You are adjacent and therefore subject to oversight for communal peace and property value protection. We have an agreement with the county sheriff's office for immediate compliance. You have 20 minutes to surrender all specified items, or we will have them seized. She actually smiled, a cold, triumphant, predatory smile. I watched her perfectly painted lips, wondering if she actually understood the difference between a bolt-action deer rifle and a child's water gun. Then the gut punch came. A white, unmarked county van pulled up behind them, and 2 deputies, looking utterly miserable, stepped out. They confirmed the temporary order, a sneaky, low-level maneuver that bypasses a full hearing, likely obtained by misrepresenting the land boundaries. I felt a crushing wave of despair mixed with white-hot fury. They actually did it. With a heavy heart and under protest, I led the deputies to the locked, fireproof safe, watching as they cataloged and removed my great-grandfather's Winchester lever-action, my hunting rifle, and the shotgun I used to scare off bears. The metallic clank of the safe door closing felt like a nail being hammered into my property rights. As the van drove away, Bethany stood there, arms crossed, savoring the moment. Consider this a lesson in civil responsibility, Ms. Jensen. You can argue the paperwork after you've cleaned up your act. The next week was a blur of legal paperwork, angry phone calls, and the sickening silence of an unarmed home. But the despair sharpened into focus. I drove down to the county clerk's office, not to fight the HOA's court order, but to confirm the one document they had conveniently overlooked, the Agricultural Exemption Covenant, AEC, tied to my land. While the physical boundaries had technically been expanded to touch the HOA's perimeter, the AEC, signed in 1978, stipulated that any land actively registered as a working agricultural ranch of over 200 acres was exempt from any non-agricultural regulatory body, unless the ranch's primary revenue stream ceased for over 1 calendar year. I finally got the appointment with Sheriff Briggs, a man whose face was as weathered and honest as my saddle leather. I didn't present the HOA's vague court order. I slapped the certified copy of the AEC and the county agricultural license down on his desk. Sheriff, they got a judge to sign a temporary injunction by filing an emergency motion claiming I was a threat to the community. But my land is legally defined as outside their regulatory jurisdiction. They used the sheriff's department to commit theft under color of law. Briggs didn't say anything for a long minute. He just stroked his chin, the office air thick with the smell of stale coffee and ink. He read the documents. Then he read them again, his eyes narrowing at the precise legal language. He looked up, and I saw the slow burn of professional outrage in his gaze. They played the system, he muttered. They exploited a zoning technicality while willfully ignoring an established agricultural covenant. Finally, I thought, someone gets it. The sweet sound of justice arrived late Friday afternoon. It wasn't the distant wail of a siren, but the distinct, low rumble of 2 sheriff's department SUVs and, crucially, the same white county van pulling back up my driveway. I was sitting on my porch, sipping iced tea, when they arrived. Bethany Hayes and her committee were already there, having set up a folding table and looking smug, ready to deliver a lecture. Sheriff Briggs stepped out of the first SUV, towering over the group. He didn't waste a second. "Mrs. Hayes." His voice was thunder, stopping her mid-sentence. "On behalf of the county, I am returning all property taken from Ms. Jensen. The temporary injunction is invalid because it violates the established, federally recognized agricultural exemption covenant on this land." Bethany's jaw dropped so hard I thought I heard a click. "What? That's impossible. We were assured by our legal team that—" "Your legal team misled you, or you misled them." The sheriff cut her off, his tone glacial. "You failed to disclose this fundamental exemption. Furthermore," he paused, pulling a fresh, official document from his pocket, "because you used the sheriff's resources to illegally seize private property under false pretense, I am directing that the Shadow Creek Homeowners Association is financially responsible for the full cost of the legal fees incurred by Ms. Jensen, the time and resource expenditure of my department, and a mandatory $50,000 bond to cover any future attempts to interfere with the Triple J Ranch's operations." The deputies opened the back of the van. The metallic thunk of my gun safe being unlocked was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Every single weapon was returned, cleaned, and accounted for. Mr. Henderson actually coughed into his hand, and Ms. Chavez looked like she might cry. But Bethany? Her face was a terrifying shade of mottled purple. Her composure shattered. "This is unacceptable. We will appeal. I'm calling my lawyer right now," she shrieked, reaching for her phone. "You do that, ma'am," Briggs said calmly, nodding toward the Escalade. "But your association is now liable. And Ms. Jensen." He turned to me, giving a tiny, almost imperceptible wink. "Your ranch is your castle. Don't let these folks forget it." As the HOA's perfect black car sped away in a furious cloud of dust and gravel, a fitting symbol of their sudden and bitter defeat, I walked back inside, the weight of the restored firearms feeling heavy and right in my hands. The sight of Bethany Hayes' face, contorted in pure, unadulterated fury and humiliation, was a priceless moment of justice. In a world increasingly ruled by petty, overreaching regulations and those who weaponize them for control, this felt like more than just a win. It was a potent, necessary reminder. Never mistake a simple working rancher's silence for weakness. And always know your deeds and your rights.